In this short revision guide, we're going to be looking at one way in which you can structure a paragraph under the essay for the Section B part of the Unit 4 exam for A-level drama and theatre studies. Now, it's a big essay. It's a 30-mark question. You've got around about 50 or 55 minutes to answer the question. So the examiner is expecting quite a lot from you, and they are certainly expecting an introduction, 3 or 4 paragraphs, along with a basic conclusion. This revision guide is going to look at how you can structure those paragraphs, and in particular how we can use that using FEAR. FEAR stands for focus, evidence and explanation, acting or action, and then response. And in this case it is a desired response because we're talking in something which is hypothetical. So I'm going to answer this question using FEAR for one paragraph. So the question comes from the 2013 paper. It's question 8 for Royschek, question 6 for Dr. Faustin, question 4 for Lysistrata. I'm going to be answering it using Royschek. And the question is, as a director, outline and justify your approach to a production of the play with particular reference to one key element of its original performance context. Now that final bit, key element of its original performance context, perhaps is the most important part of that question. And you really got to be able to show the examiner in a question like this that you can connect your production of the play to the original performance context and to a modern audience as well. So we're going to start by writing the focus. And remember, the focus is the point of the focus of your paragraph. It should be short and concise. It's the shortest part of your paragraph, and it should last roughly around about 20 or so words. So my example is, one of the key political contexts when the play was first performed in 1913 was highlighting the plight of the individual man who felt powerless against those in power. This is a short opening sentence that clearly connects to the question and, most importantly, to the element of that question, which is one key element of the original performance context. So then moving on to the evidence and explanation, and that really is setting the scene, the context of what you're going to be talking about. So this is going to be about double the length of the focus, and again needs to be as concise as possible. And you need to find a moment in your production that evidences your focus. So for example, I think that scene 1 is important in establishing the effects that this powerlessness has on one man, Royschek. In my production of the play, we'd see him paranoid and on the brink of delusion, although he is still able to rationalize and think about what he is seeing and hearing. He is talking to André, who, in my production, has been a friend of Royschek for a long time and cares for him very much, and as the scene moves on, begins to realize that his friend Royschek is becoming delusional from the stress of the daily pressures and expectations he is placed under from those around him, such as the captain and Marie. So here we've gone into some detail of what happens in the scene and your overall directorial vision of how that scene would transpire in terms of the contextual elements of the relationships between the characters and the fundamental way in which you want the characters to be perceived. So when you put these two together, you get this bit of paragraph, which you can pause and read. And what that opening bit of the paragraph does is establish that you're going to be talking about a particular element of the original performance context and how you see that as a director coming out in one particular scene. Note that we haven't actually talked about how we're going to do it. And that's the next bit, and that's the most important bit. So here we have our acting and action, and this is going to be the longest section of your paragraph, and we'll cover everything you need to include to explain how you intend to communicate your thoughts to the audience. You need to include every key word and movement that you can absolutely just describe every moment using as much of the keywords as possible. at the same time as being really specific with examples. Go for one line, one movement, and explain that in detail. That is far better than describing a larger moment with lots of lines in not much detail. So the example goes like this. When Royschek says, "Quiet, can you hear it?" I'd ask the acts to crouch down in their stance and pull Andre down with them, making their proxemics close and ask them to make eye contact. These proxemics and eye contact would communicate that Royschek wants to share a secret with Andre. I'd ask the actor to say the word quiet in a hushed tone of voice and a slow pace, as they descend also at a slow pace. This would communicate that Royschek is paranoid and worried that others might hear what he has to say. I've asked the actor to playing Royschek to experiment with different body language and posture to find something that communicates a sense of discomfort and paranoia. But when Royschek says, "Can you hear it, Andre? Can you hear it?" I'd ask the actor to emphasize the "you," because I think Royschek wants to confirm that someone else can see and hear the thoughts he is seeing and hearing. This establishes that whilst Royschek is having a delusion, he is only beginning and can still question his own mind and perceptions. I'd also ask for a pause between Andre and when he repeats the question, "Can you hear it?" I'd also ask the actors to say that line at a louder volume and a heavy emphasis on the word "hear." I think that this would highlight the sense of urgency in Royschek and a sense of panic and fear that he might be having a delusion and that nothing he thinks is real is. I think that would be quite a frightening experience. So there, we've written a part of the paragraph which is almost as long, if not longer, than the previous two sections of the paragraph. But here we've gone into a really finite detail of a quote and how it would be said and how the actors would move when they would say it and what they are going to communicate to the audience, and making sure that you're linking that communication back to the point of the paragraph, which is how the effects of the powerlessness on him. So here is those three sections of the paragraph put together, and you can begin to see that this is quite a lengthy paragraph. But again, the exam is 30 marks, so this is the kind of expectation that they have of you. And finally, we're then looking at the response. And this then ties us back to the focus, to the original performance context. And in this context, the question I've answered is referring to the effects of the powerlessness of Royschek. And like the opening part of the paragraph, this is also very short, ties it all up. This is also going to connect your answer back to the demands of the question, but also to the modern context of your production. So in doing this, I hope to communicate how it might have felt for the young people in pre-First World War Germany, as they watched on helplessly as their country slipped further towards war because of the actions of a few ignorant people in the power at the time. The outcome of Royschek's stress is mental illness, a very common reaction both then and now. I think this would resonate with modern audiences as well, as people are forced to work harder and harder as the government withdraws key funding from services and squeezes pensions further. And I think you could probably go a little bit more further with that answer and a little bit into more depth as well. So when you add all those four elements together, you get quite a weighty paragraph, which goes into quite a lot of depth in terms of how you'd perform something. But there is definitely a process there which starts looking at something at a big picture level, and in this case it's the plight of the individual man and the powerlessness of that, and then it takes us to the next point, which is looking at a scene and an overview of how that scene would be played, and then it takes us even deeper and takes us to a quote within that scene and how that quote would be performed, referring to keywords all the way through and then referring to the context of what that communicates to the audience. And then finally it takes a step back out but uses that information to then tell us how we would connect to the original performance conditions and how we would connect to it as a modern audience. And then in your exam, you would be expected to write certainly 3 maybe 4 of those paragraphs. At this point, if you haven't done so already, I would suggest that you go onto the Edexcel website and you download all the past papers. Then you look at all the questions and you attempt to answer as many of those questions as possible. Bearing in mind that by now you should have your scripts full of annotations. And the annotations are essentially the action that we've put into that paragraph.